Let's talk about identifier, which is synonymous to variable name. So you probably heard variables, right? We'll talk about variables later. The variables associated with a type. Generally, when we're talking about identifier, we're talking about the naming, right? The names that we have assigned to these variables that you see in computer sciences. So in C++ or even in C, right? Any other language, these variable have they have names, and these are what we call identifiers. So one thing about the identifiers is, there's naming conventions for each of these things. And each identifier or identified object, right, is sitting inside a memory having a unique memory address. Let's just assume that this is the memory cloud, right? Let's say this is 64 gigabytes and what have you. Now there is a blimp in here, and that represents, let's say, integer, right, I. So this I is what we call the identifier. And this identifier occupies this memory space here, right? This memory space is 4 bytes. And it has a memory address, let's say 0 times FA 1, right? That's what we meant. So each identified object, okay, we loosely term this as a something that occupies memory address, that consumes memory at runtime. Okay, that's what we meant by object. So each of these objects, once the identifier has a name to it, this is what we call identifier. So with that, let's move on to the next page. So there are naming conventions associated with these identifiers. First character must be an alphabetic characters on the scroll, must consist of only alphabetic characters, digit on the scroll. First 63 characters of identifier are significant, can be deleted here. So you don't really have to memorize this, and just remember though, in C and some of the languages, first of all, identifier must start with a letter or underscore. So you can have something to the effect of C, right, program, right? Or you can have underscore C program. Okay, so this is underscore, not dash, as a start. And then you can use uppercase C or lowercase c, okay? Or lowercase c, doesn't really matter. It may not have any space or hyphen, so you can't have, hyphen means dash, right? So you can't have, dash C dash A. This doesn't work, right? But as long as you have underscore, C underscore A, something to that effect, then this will work. So there's going to be a lot of these use cases out there. So by and large, you have to remember not to use these characters with different or characters that are not supported. So C is a case-sensitive language, so it's other languages you encounter. So there's a difference between, let's say, ADD, right, and ADD, okay? So if you have these two identifiers, they're actually occupied two different memory addresses at runtime, supporting, assuming that these two identifiers have a different data type, or even the same data type associated with it. Let's say this is integer, this is integer. Then by and large, yeah, these two are two different things because C is a case-sensitive language. Okay, all right. Let's move on to the next one. So this is a table that illustrates some of the valid identified names or invalid names. So remember, when we're talking about identifier, we're talking about variable. Okay, so basically they're variable, but variable has a different definition. Variable comes with a type. So when we're talking about invalid name, valid name, these are variable names, okay, or identifiers. So you can have a valid but poor style. So yes, so in general, you definitely don't want to name your variable A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right, or I, J, because they don't connote to any particular purpose. You want to use a name that has something, that means something. So you can have what we call snake case, right? This is what we call snake case. Or in this case, this is what we call camel case, okay, camel casing. The difference between the two is a snake is concatenated using underscore. This is what we call snake, okay, casing. Camel casing uses a combination of upper and lower cases. So it looks like a camel humps, right? So these are two very commonly used styles. And in some languages, you also see underscore in front of it, right? So a lot of times, like, let's say in Microsoft, they can have M, right? INT. This signifies that this is a member of, this, and this member is a local variable. So you can also have underscore in front of MINT or something to that effect to say that, hey, this is internal. Okay, this is a local or internal. So it depends on the SDKs you're working with. And these are software development kits or APIs that we're working with, different companies having different naming conventions or standards, API standards. And they'll give you the documentation and you can go by it. But just remember, do not ever start with your variable with a question mark, with $sign, ampersand, pound, dash, whatever you have. And then you can't have a dash in between, right? These two variables or a hyphen. This is invalid. You cannot also have spaces in between, or even digits starting with the naming. These are invalid characters. And the other thing is you cannot use keywords. So you cannot have, use the keyword long as your identifier, okay, names or variable names. This is simply invalid. So just go through these. There's plenty of documentations in the textbook online that talks about these variations of valid and invalid combinations of identifier or variable names.